The models that this video pertains to are the 43, 50, 55, and 65 PFL 5604/F7 A or /F7 C, as well as the 43, 50, 55, and 65 PFL 5704/F7 A.
Well, hello, welcome to the fifth video in our series that is designed to walk you through setting up and getting the most out of your Philips 2020 Android television. In this particular video, I'm going to walk you through some of the important customizations that you would do for picture quality, color, contrast, brightness, etc., as well as if you didn't listen to the setup video and you forgot to auto-program your tuner or your cable signal, how to quickly and easily do that. And then finally, we will talk about how to connect peripheral devices to this television and to make sure that the resolution setting for the HDMI input matches the output from your peripheral device. That's going to be particularly important for those of you with newer devices that support HDR10. A lot of the new gaming systems support HDR10, PlayStation Pros, etc. And of course, if you have a newer Blu-ray player that supports, 4K at 60 Hz with HDR10, you're going to want to make sure that the HDMI input shows you the full picture resolution that your device is capable of. What we're going to start with, however, is what not to do. And it takes a little bit of a mental adjustment, but the logic of it makes sense. On most televisions, you can simply hit the menu and then go into settings and you can adjust all your picture settings. Now, if you hit menu on an Android television, it brings you to this home screen. And if you were to go to the settings menu, you would see under device preferences, oh, there's picture. Great, I'm going to adjust my picture settings. I would like to brighten up my antenna signal. It's not bright enough. So you would select picture and you would see, oh, yep, here's all my settings. Let me adjust them. The way that this Android television works, however, is not like a normal television. The picture settings that you are adjusting them for what is on the screen right now. In other words, in this case, the home screen. That's it. In order to adjust the picture settings for any source, whether it's your Blu-ray player connected to HDMI 3, or your PlayStation Pro connected to HDMI 2, or whatever you have connected to HDMI 1, or your antenna signal, you have to be on that signal first. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The easiest way to get to an input is either to use the input icon on the home screen or the corresponding input button on the remote. It's a little dark at this point, but you can kind of see that the input button right there matches what's on the screen. It's a rectangle with an arrow pointing to the right. And either one will pull up a list of your inputs. And if you select channels, you will now go to your antenna signal. And once you're on your antenna signal, you'll notice that I have no channels. Why is that? Because I didn't listen to my own video. And I kind of did that deliberately for this video. But in my setup video, I strongly recommended that you auto-program your antenna at the time that you set up your TV. Now, having failed to do that, I'm going to show you how to program it quickly and easily if you skipped that step during the initial setup. Nobody got time for that. I understand everybody's busy. You wanted to get straight into Netflix or YouTube, so you didn't program the antenna, but now you come back and you want to look at the antenna. So the easiest way to do that is to now look at this how-to app that we've included on the TV. And if you select the how-to app, right at the bottom, you have a button labeled Live TV. If you select Live TV and then click again for Setup, it will dump you straight into the channel installation menu. There's no hunting for it. There's no going through layers of menu. It's just an easy, convenient shortcut. So I'm going to go ahead and auto-program my antenna now. And I'm going to pause this while we're doing that. And we'll come back in a second and I will finally show you how to adjust the picture settings on an antenna signal. All right, we're back after we have selected to install our antenna channels. You arrive on a screen that indicates how many channels were found. We only found 10 here. We're not in a great location with my little tabletop antenna. And then there's a big blue button there that is highlighted, and if you hit the OK button, that indicates, yeah, okay, finish, I'm done with this. So you select finish, and you will now come back to where you were on the Help app. This time, however, when we tune over to channels, because we have actually programmed the television, we have content. Now, once you are on the source that you want to adjust the picture for, in this case, television, you're going to want to hit the Options button. The Options button is the button that is going to be right here on the right side next to the Google Assistant button. It's labeled Options, and that's going to pull up a submenu. But I will tell you that when you press the button for the first time, there is going to be a delay as the application loads. It's kind of an Android operating system thing. The first time that you come in here, it's not going to respond instantaneously. So I had pressed it just a second ago, and you will undoubtedly go through this the very first time you activate this application as well. And there is a delay. This is only the first time after initial setup. Once you have the application pop up, it will come up instantly. So I'm going to go ahead and press the button again, and eventually you're going to see that the application comes up. There it is. Now you'll notice, now that it's popped up once and it's fully loaded, all I have to do is press the button one time and it pops right up. So that's just an initial setup sort of thing as it's configuring. Once you have the Options menu up, you can now adjust all of the different picture settings that you're used to, whether that's the picture formatting, if you want it to be automatic, full, 4:3, unscaled, etc. I typically leave things in unscaled depending upon what source I'm on. That obviously is not the right choice for this particular channel. So let's change that to full here, or automatic here, and let it scale nicely. You can also adjust your closed captions. So if you wanted to turn on closed captions, this is where you would do it. And you would either select on or closed caption with mute. So if we select on, we can then pick which service, whether it's CC1, 2, 3, etc., or text 1, 2, 3. And then we also have the option to change the text size, the font family, the color, the opacity, all the things that you might want to adjust. So we've now turned on closed captioning, and you'll see in a minute, there's the closed captioning working. So that's how you get into your closed captioning setting as well. It's the Options menu on the source that you're watching. You do have the option for a number of other settings in here, but I did promise you picture settings. So you go all the way to the right after you hit the Options button, and you come down to Device Preferences, and you go down here where it says Picture. Now this is the exact same menu that you saw on the home screen, except now you're adjusting the brightness, contrast, color, tint, sharpness, gamma, whatever, of your antenna or cable signal. So looking at this picture, maybe I want to brighten it up a little bit. So I can brighten it up. Oh, that's way too much. So back it back off, adjust my contrast, my color, etc. You do have some advanced video options down here that those of you with more familiarity with how to adjust displays can go into. There are any number of different settings in here, from noise reduction to artifact reduction to dynamic contrast. Depending upon how much of a video file you are, you may want to disable some of these so you're looking at as pure a picture as possible. You may want to turn off the film mode if you don't like the effect of film. You may want to turn on or off either blue stretch, game mode, or PC mode, depending upon which input and what's connected. You would probably not turn those on for antenna here. But this is where your picture settings are. And then you do have basic gamma and basic color temperature settings. So not only do you have the ability to change the color temperature to either cool or warm, depending upon your preference, but you will have already seen you can adjust the red, the green, and the blue gains separately. So this television offers a tremendous amount of customization. I would recommend, if you're not a videophile, if you don't have a good understanding of how to adjust video signals, to stay out of some of those more advanced settings and just stick with your basic backlight, brightness, contrast, color settings. Okay, so we've now adjusted the picture quality here on our antenna. One of the other features in this television is that there is a program guide. If you hit the TV guide button that is on the remote, and that button is located to the left of the Google Assistant button, it's labeled TV Guide, it will pull up a TV Guide. Now, the way that this TV Guide works is a little strange. It only shows you what is on the channel that you're tuned to at this moment. And it shows what's coming up. Apparently, we are in the middle of a Criminal Minds marathon here on this particular channel. But if I tune to the right, oh, it's a Baybar marathon. Rookie Blue. So we basically have a lot of different marathons going on. There we go. Here's a channel that actually has more than one thing on. Of course, it's the shopping channel, but you get the idea. So as you're scrolling through the channels here, left or right, you see the arrows at the top. You then see what's coming on, what's coming up today, now, next program, and then tomorrow, etc. So let's find something that has some programming that we might want to watch. So here we have Living the Way, apparently, and then at 2100 we have a Battlefield show. So this is how you can quickly find what's on different channels, but you do have to kind of scroll through the guide, because the guide is only going to show you what is on the channel you're on now and into the future. So that is how the guide works on this television. So that is how the antenna works. That's how you change the picture settings for your antenna or cable feed, and that's how the guide works. All of your picture settings and all of your customization and closed captioning, etc., those are set up with the TV options button. And again, the first time you load TV options, it may take a while as that application has to load and then run. So that is normal. Don't panic if that happens to you. Now, coming back to the home screen, I want to show you how you would connect and label a peripheral device. So I've now plugged in the Blu-ray player that is sitting there in the shot, heretofore quiet and unnoticed. And you will notice that if I come into my inputs now, I do have that HDMI 3 is connected to a Philips 4K Blu-ray player. So if I click on that, because we have HDMI CEC and these devices are talking to each other, it will automatically start up the Blu-ray player. And voila, we have a picture. Now, to adjust the picture quality for your Blu-ray player, and you can substitute any peripheral device here. It could be your PlayStation Pro, it could be your Blu-ray player, it could be any other peripheral device that you have. Maybe you have a standalone Roku box or other streaming device, an Apple TV that you're connecting. You would again hit your options button. And your options button now, every setting that you adjust here is only going to be adjusted for this HDMI input, which I think is HDMI 3. So again, you go all the way to the right to settings, you go under device preferences, and you select picture. And here I have my brightness, contrast, color, tint, and sharpness for a Blu-ray player. Well, Blu-rays are really sharp, so I want to crank the sharpness on that. I might want to adjust my contrast or brightness. Obviously, if you have some sort of a configuration disc, one of the discs that you put in a Blu-ray player to actually get test patterns on the screen so that you can exactly adjust the brightness and contrast to the test pattern, put that in and adjust these settings accordingly. So that is how you adjust the picture settings for your peripheral device. Now, there is another key setting that matters for peripheral devices, and it is located under inputs. but you do have to be on the input that you're trying to adjust. Once you are tuned, in this case to HDMI 3, and you go under your settings menu and select inputs, this is where you can choose whether to have HDMI control on or off, or auto power on or off, or TV auto power on or off. So in a nutshell, do I want to be able to use the HDMI connection between the peripheral device and the TV? If I turn the device on, do I want the TV to come on? If I turn the TV to come on, do I want the device to come on? That kind of thing. But this is the most important setting that you've never heard of. HDMI EDID version. If you have a device that is capable of 4K ultra high definition at 60 Hertz, or the easier thing to probably remember is that it supports HDR. So if you've got an HDR10 device, PlayStation Pro, brand new Xbox, or a brand new Blu-ray player that supports HDR, you're going to want to make sure that the EDID version is set to 2.0. If this is not set correctly, if you have it set to 1.4, and you put in a 4K Ultra HD 60 Hertz disc with HDR and go to play it, you're most likely going to see an error message on the screen generated by the Blu-ray player saying resolution not supported. And you're going to get upset and you're going to say, wait a minute, I thought I bought a 4K HDR capable television. Why am I not seeing that? If that happens to you, don't panic. Simply go into your settings menu while you're on the input. So you tune to your input, you hit options, and from that options menu, you go all the way to the right to settings. Then you select device preferences and inputs, and go down to the input where it says HDMI EDID version at the bottom, and change it to 2.0. You can also put it on auto. You saw there's an auto setting there. That'll also work. Once you have it set to the correct resolution, the device will correctly identify itself as, I'm an HDR device. The TV will go, cool, this input's configured to handle HDR, and you'll see a picture. The other symptom that you might run into if it's set incorrectly is you might get sound with no picture. That's also typically a common occurrence if you have a device that is trying to send an HDR signal but doesn't have the capability to scale its resolution down to show you an error message. Then you'll just have sound with no picture. So that's not a good outcome there either. So that's how you configure the HDMI input on the TV to support the correct resolution that the device is trying to send. Now there is another thing that you might wish to do, and that is you might wish to name the input. So if you go down again in device preferences and you go under inputs, and this time at the top you pick the connected input, which is HDMI 3, we can name it whatever we want. We can call it Blu-ray because this is in fact a Blu-ray player. We can also go down and give it a custom name. So if you want to call it, if you have two game systems and you want one to be PSP and one to be Xbox, that way when you pull up the HDMI inputs on your television, let's say you're on your home screen and you hit inputs, you will see this is now labeled Blu-ray down below where it says Philips 4K BDP. And obviously if you had an Xbox and you named it Xbox, it would say Xbox, which kind of makes sense. The last thing that you might wish to do is remove inputs that you're not using. And you can do that either from the input screen that we were just on or the main settings menu. So if you go into the main settings menu on the home screen and again go down to where it says inputs, but this time pick one of the other inputs that's nothing is connected to. Let's get rid of HDMI 1, for example. I'm going to say no, don't show it. And then if I go back and say HDMI 2, don't show that because there's nothing connected to it. Now when I go to my home screen and either select inputs or select the input button on the remote, I only see the inputs that I've identified that I have, which are the tuner of the TV, which is labeled channels here, and my Philips 4K Blu-ray player. So those inputs that I'm not using, they drop off, and I now have this television essentially fully configured. Picture quality wise, closed captioning is turned on my antenna. I've adjusted the brightness and contrast and picture settings of all of the devices that I have connected. So those are some of the key settings that you might wish to adjust. I will take a second to show you a couple of other shortcuts that are in the Home Help app. So if you go down here, let's say for whatever reason you were just blowing through setting up the TV and you didn't even connect it to the internet. You just spaced. You forgot it was a smart TV. Or your network connections changed. You know, you bought a new router and you named your wireless router SSID something different because you wanted to kick your lazy neighbor off your wireless connection that he was stealing. I don't know. Could happen. We're all sort of quarantined now. These things happen. So if you go straight under network connection here, it will take you right to set up network connection. So this is the shortcut to redoing the network configuration that you normally would have done during initial setup. So you don't have to hunt and peck through different menus. It's right here, one button away. And then the other shortcut is labeled Talkback. So you'll recall I did indicate in a previous video that we have the accessibility menu where you have a bunch of different features for example, visually impaired folks. They would prefer their TV to speak aloud every button press so that they can hear where they're navigating and what their volume is set at. That's a great feature for visually impaired folks. It's an annoying feature for the rest of us. And you may have a household with both types of persons. So there is a keyboard, or rather remote control shortcut. If you hit digits quickly, there's a secret code that will get you into this feature. But if you want to disable it or enable it, you can just go right here where it says Talkback and hit Setup, and you can enable it or disable it with the click of a button. So there is a shortcut on the screen to disable it, because obviously we're assuming you don't need the feature on if you can see the shortcut on the screen. As you can see from the ticker on the bottom of the screen, the 2-button shortcut to instantly enable or disable the Talkback feature is to press and hold the back button on the remote. That's the arrow key that points to the left, as well as the down button, which is the thumb pad right below where it says OK. Some other features that you might want to pay attention to. You do have under device preferences a number of other settings. Language, if for some reason the language gets a little bit out of whack, this is where you would select English, Spanish, or French. And then you do have up at the top the ability to have your date and time. You can use the network provided time. You can set your time zones here. You can use 24 or non-24 time. So most of us in America, we use the 12-hour format. We don't use the 24-hour format. And beyond that, I think another key thing that you might find useful at some point is this About menu. This About menu is going to show you everything about the TV, from what version of Android we're running, which in this case is 9, to the software version and when it was last updated, to the security patch levels and all this. This is useful information if you ever have to call us, if you ever have any kind of an issue. And if you want to rename your device, I jokingly named this television Fred when I was setting it up in a previous video, but you can click on under About where it says device name and change the device name right here. So that's how you would either rename the television if you didn't like the name that you picked, or if you forgot to name it, you just go right under device name and do that. So very useful menu there. And then one last thing that I will show you, you do have some Google Assistant settings here. So you can look at the permissions that you have for your settings. You can tell it which apps you want to include in search results. You can also tell it that you want a safe search filter, or that you want to block or not block offensive words. And if you need the open source license for Google Assistant, it is here as well. And then finally, under accessibility, this is the full accessibility menu. And you can see all the various different settings. If I want high contrast text, because I'm getting a little bit older, I want to be able to really see those words pop on the screen. You can see the difference just on the screen. If I turn it on, you see how bright the white text got where it says Netflix or search movies, TV, and more at the top. And then it's much dimmer when I turn it off. I typically leave that on. I find that useful. And then you have the full accessibility menu and the talkback, which I did show you the shortcut how to get to previously. Another menu that you might find interesting is the Screensaver menu. You see here that you can turn it on or pick either the backdrop option or the colors option. So either one of those, whichever you prefer. You can also sort of determine how long you'd like to wait before the screensaver kicks in. 5 minutes is way too short. I'm going to set it at 30. And you can also have a sleep setting. So if there's inactivity, nobody touches the remote, nothing happens, you can set the TV to turn off after, in this case, 6 hours of inactivity. And you can also start now if you want to see what your screensaver actually is going to look like. So this is the image that Google is providing us right now. That image will rotate through. Another menu that might be important for you is the home screen menu. We did demonstrate this previously in a previous video, but we did not cover one part of this, which is the bottom section. This is where your open source licenses are. So if you want to take a look at the open source license for either Android TV Home or Android TV Core Services, they are here waiting for you to peruse them. If you are totally bored and having trouble falling asleep, feel free to read all of this information. However, for those of you that are needing the open source licenses, that's where they are. Another menu that you may use from time to time is the storage menu. This is the menu that you click on if you're wanting to see how much space you have left in the television. You see that it's got 4.6 gigabytes of total space. Clicking on that will then dive deeper into the amount of storage that you have. And it will show you the various apps and how much space they are taking up. You can then go even deeper into this by clicking any individual item, such as apps. And here are all the actual apps. And clicking on See All Apps will literally show you all of your apps. And you can see that Disney's taking up some space here. Maybe you're not using an app and you want to clear the cache. So you can click on, for example, Play Music. Go down where it says Clear Data, and that will clear the cache. So you now see down here that once you've done that, the cache has 0 bytes of memory in it. So that is the storage menu. Heading back one level here. Another menu that is sometimes very useful, especially if you have a sound bar or an external home theater system, is the sound menu. This is a menu that you can use from the options button on the remote control for an individual input if you're trying to adjust the balance or some of these settings for that input. You'll notice here there is a 5-band graphic equalizer. If you wanted to crank the bass, for example, you would grab this top 120 hertz line and just turn the number all the way up. And you can adjust the other parts of the spectrum as well. The digital output on the back of the television is an optical output. The default setting is PCM. If you are running a wire to a home theater system that for whatever reason doesn't need PCM but would rather send that a Dolby Digital Plus or a Dolby Digital signal, this is where you would make that choice under the digital output option in the sound menu. Most of the time PCM is the right setting, however. So if we head back again, one level up, this is an important setting if you are using the optical out and you find that your audio and your video are getting out of sync. You can actually delay the audio signal to match up with what you're seeing on screen. So this is a setting that you may find useful, again, if you're connected to a home theater system or a sound bar using the optical output. And then at the bottom of the menu, you do see the auto volume control. That is what we used to call smart sound a long time ago, but it's basically the setting that allows you to minimize the volume difference between, say, a commercial on the antenna and the normal program. So clips a little bit the highs so that in volume, so that the volume stays relatively flat. And that is a quick tour of the menu. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. I think the key settings that you want to remember from this video and that you'll make use of are how do you adjust the picture settings on a given input. And you just need to remember that you go to the source that you're trying to adjust. So if you wanted to adjust your antenna picture quality, you would go to channels. If you wanted to adjust your picture settings for your Blu-ray player, you would go to that input, then hit the options button and go into the menu and adjust the picture settings there. Secondly, you want to remember those HDMI settings. If you ever find that you get a resolution not supported error, or you're getting sound but no picture, you definitely want to navigate to your input section of the menu and change the EDID version from 1.4 to 2.0. And then finally, I think the other important options that we pointed out to you that are very helpful are the shortcuts that you have in the help application for connecting network connection, for reprogramming or auto-programming your channels, and for turning TalkBack on or off. The other reason, by the way, that you might want a shortcut to be able to reprogram the antenna is that a lot of stations around the country are going through a renumbering. They're actually consolidating and moving the different channels. It's called channel packing. And you may suddenly find that channel 13 is no longer at channel 13 and you need to reprogram the tuner. So that's a very useful feature to have. Hopefully this has been helpful. And we will, in the next video, talk a little bit more in detail about how to make sure that all of your applications are updating or up to date, and how to check for firmware updates on your wireless network or wired network. So tune in for that video, and hopefully this has been helpful.